might recall, I was the first person to break the story that a very early test screening, like last year for this film, had not gone over well internally at Disney. And that was later proven to be true, that the movie was therefore going through significant reshoots to try and fix that. And it had seemed that they had done it, that it was another Rogue One situation where the reshoots had saved the day. But when you see the final product, a lot of things have been cut that not just myself, but also other scoopers have been reporting to you. And I think basically what's happened is that instead of this being the MCU proper's answer to Sony's very successful No Way Home, it almost seems as if the Marvel brass made the decision to make that be Secret Wars, which is coming in the next few years, and to dial back instead the cameos that I think would have distracted people from the disjointedness of the story that is here. So I just wanted to put that in the front of my review. I think if this was a different franchise and a different studio, that someday you might hear the story as to what happened and why so many things were changed and why we got the end product that we did. But because it's Marvel and because Disney is such a well-run machine, I think it'll just move full steam ahead. And I think that's how most fans will react to this as well. I am very curious to see, though, how this affects the box office. I do believe it will go to Disney Plus in 45 days. All right, so this review is spoiler-free, and I went over my notes several times to make sure that was the case. Because again, speaking of No Way Home, I think many of you have made it clear that that backfired on you and you want to be surprised when you're in the theater. And a couple of people in my crowd managed to avoid spoilers, and there were gasps here and there during my press screening. So I think the debate over Multiverse of Madness is going to be intense, as people will be deeply divided on the film. And I wish I could say it was as simple as, if you're coming to see this movie for Doctor Strange, you'll love it. And if you're going to see it for Wanda, maybe not as much. But I think the real issues here are that the movie is really Kevin Feige and the burden of huge expectations, Sam Raimi being a very poor choice to direct, it turns out, and that WandaVision is completely undermined. That was perhaps the most shocking to me of all. And if you care about WandaVision, that's going to really, I think, if you're not able to let that go, I think that's really going to affect your enjoyment of this movie. Like if you told me Loki and now Multiverse of Madness screenwriter Michael Waldron, who has a cameo, by the way, in the balcony during the wedding scene very early on in the film, like the last time you cut to the balcony, you'll see him on the side. I was like, hey, it's Michael Waldron. But if you told me he didn't watch WandaVision, like didn't even watch it, I would believe you. That's what it does to WandaVision. So I think if you lower your expectations to about a 6, and mine were at an 11, and I think many of you have your expectations at that same level as well, but take them down to a 6. And if you're a diehard MCU fan, not Marvel Comics fan, that's crucial. If you're a diehard MCU fan, but yet somehow didn't see WandaVision or didn't really care for it, and you don't know that much about the source material, the Marvel Comics, well then I think that's the sweet spot where you're going to enjoy this film the most. Speaking of expectations, at my press screening, 2 college bros sat behind me. I don't know how they got into the press screening, but it was these 2 college students. And they were cool guys, by the way. What caught my attention about them is that before the movie, there was like a graphic up on screen, the main poster, and one of them was like, dude, don't you think Wanda's new costume is awesome? Like, it's both super sexy, yet still allows her to be taken seriously as a superhero. And I was like, these guys are awesome. And then they were very polite during the movie, though I was worried they were going to talk through the movie. They did not. But they spent the entire end credits while you wait for the final end credit scene there too. They spent that whole time listing everything that they've been hoping for in the movie that they didn't get. And they weren't even angry. They were really just kind of shell-shocked. They were like, wow, it's like having a Christmas list and getting absolutely nothing that you asked for. It was that's kind of how they felt. But it was still Christmas. I guess that's kind of how I would describe it. And so you don't want to ruin Christmas. So you're like, I guess I'll like the gifts I got. And the other thing that really stood out to me about my screening is that something happened that I've never seen happen in a Marvel screening before. I've seen people gasp several times. I've seen people cheer. I've had experiences that have really lasted and stood with me. And that's one of the reasons people still go to see Marvel movies in a theater, to have these experiences. But what happened here is that in the third act, I couldn't believe it. The audience laughed at the movie instead of with it. I've never seen that happen before in an MCU movie. It was really fascinating. They laughed at it several times. But I know a lot of you are excited about this movie. You've already purchased tickets for multiple showings. So let's start with the good before we have to discuss the not so good. And I would say perhaps downright bad. All right, and I think, again, people will be deeply divided on this. And part of what will divide people is people's determination for the MCU never to have a bad movie and to have a good time. And I can understand that. All right, again, you want to have a nice Marvel Christmas. All right, good. The movie is 90% Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch, and it's so faithful to the mystical Marvel comics. That's pretty cool to see. Both Benny C and Lizzie O really know how to hand jive, and the visuals are very trippy and inventive. I like that. I appreciated that a lot. Also, there's a decent amount of Scarlet Witch comic book lore worked into the film as well. Well, elements from her lore. The stories are all off. I think this is the least comics accurate I've seen Kevin Feige be. And I wonder if it'll be interesting to see if he has just enough to have people continue to give him a pass with the changes that he does make. He pushes it as far as I've ever seen him push it with this movie. But still, for comic book fans, it's cool to see these elements in the movie, even if they're not used properly. And with Benedict Cumberbatch and Elizabeth Olsen front and center, well, I mean, they're incredible actors, so you can't go that wrong with them. Benny C is asked to do an awful lot, sometimes too much, but he is 1,000% committed, and he really is Doctor Strange, except for that wig. I don't know what's going on with that wig. But anyway, my favorite moments for him are the subtle character flourishes. Like very early on in the film, he leaps off a balcony, and it was just perfect. I was like, that was amazing. And of course, Elizabeth Olsen, who is also 1,000% committed, even though maybe she should have challenged, I think, Feige, Raimi, and Waldron a little bit on what was happening here. I think she trusted them too much. She looks stunning, and again, we get to finally see at least a very strong hint of the Scarlet Witch of the comics finally join the MCU. I mean, as those two guys said behind me, she definitely looks sexy and powerful. Plus, there are some very inventive ideas on how she can use her powers, how they've been twisted by the Darkhold, and how she can scare the crap out of us. The movie actually isn't that scary, to be honest with you. We'll talk about that in the bad section. I had a couple of you DM me and say, hey, I'm thinking of taking a small child to see this movie. There were lots of children at my screening, and none of them were scared or cried out, or everybody was fine. It's not that scary, and it has horror elements to it. I think there's maybe a cut out there that's scarier, but this is not that cut. All right. Olsen once again does a terrific job conveying Wanda's love for her children and the pain of having them taken from her. There are also, as I said, 2 end credit scenes. Now, the one at the very, very end before the lights go up is just a silly joke, and I don't even think it was that funny. But the first one does a great job about getting us excited about what's next. And that's what a proper end credit scene should do. That's one of the moments that did elicit some gasps from my audience. All right, so what are the problems? Oh boy, this brings me no joy. All right, so let's start with Sam Raimi. I think Scott Derrickson is about to feel very vindicated because Raimi did not work out. Whew, do not invite this man back. His humor is too silly and his idea of sentimentality too hokey for today's audiences. Doctor Strange has a short monologue in the third act that is really not good. Like, wow, my audience laughed at that. And in fact, every time the audience laughed at the movie, which was a few times again, as I said, and also scratched their head and was like, what? I'm not going to give anything away, but there are some really weird, questionable choices made. I believe it was overall Raimi's influence that caused that. I think it's basically his fault, him and Michael Waldron. Also, because Raimi ultimately had to deliver a PG-13 movie, this movie feels significantly whittled down. In fact, I know that it is, but you can feel it. It's not like, oh, we just know there's other stuff. you can tell when you're watching the movie. There's always this buildup to a cool scene that's coming with really cool powers. You're like, oh, here it comes. This is it. But then everything happens so fast or off screen that it's over before the scene has really even begun. And so you aren't allowed to savor anything. And it really hurts the action sequences. Also, all the cool moments have already been shown in the ad campaign to sell you this movie. Like, you would think these would be the moments right before the amazing moments. Like, remember that moment in Infinity War when Doctor Strange went full awesome? And we were all like, oh my God, I can't believe we actually just saw that. Imagine if you put that in the trailers. And I mean, I'm sure someone might be like, oh, it was in a trailer, Grace. But I think for the most part, that was something that I certainly saw for the first time in the theater, and it made a difference. But here, I already saw everything cool, so it was frustrating. I can't think of a single standout action scene in the film, in fact, which is a real problem for this kind of a movie. And to my surprise, Wanda has seemed far more powerful in her other Marvel outings than she does here. I kept waiting for Wanda. They were like, Scarlet Witch, Scarlet Witch, the Scarlet Witch of legend. She never showed up. She was far more powerful in Avengers Endgame in that brief moment and at the end of WandaVision than she ever was here. And all the cameos, the crutch this movie was supposed to rely on, shockingly underwhelming. That's how I would describe them. And what's shocking about it is that this is Kevin Feige, who's supposed to be the master of this sort of thing. And What If was a multiverse slam dunk? We'll talk about those in my spoiler coverage. But overall, considering how short and lacking the Illuminati sequence is, I don't even know if they should have put it in the movie. And on that note, I would say the same thing about America Chavez. Her character takes up valuable screen time. She has a lot of screen time, but we have 2 spellcasters. Surely they could have gotten from multiverse to multiverse themselves, especially since all of America Chavez's personality from the comics has been sucked out, so it's not even the fan favorite character anyway. Her power does look really cool when she uses it. That is really cool. But a lot of the time, though, other times, the VFX on her power set is very well done. But there are other points in the movie where the VFX is like shockingly bad, distractingly bad, especially in the first fight scene. I've seen a couple of you put out stills and be like, Grace, what is with these visual effects? And other people have been like, is that really from the movie? I've seen the movie. It is from the movie. That is a real still from the film. I'd also like to add that as the MCU expands rapidly, it needs to be careful to remain distinct. Like, for instance, the scene here where Kamar-Taj gets ready to defend itself, that seems almost identical to Tao Lo when it gets ready to defend itself in Shang-Chi. So these places, you have to feel like each part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is unique and its own cool thing. There's just starting to be too much overlap. Finally, Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch, to come this close to finally having the awesome character from the comics come into the MCU, yet at the same time, to see WandaVision be almost entirely undone is brutal. You feel like shell-shocked as a Wanda fan watching this movie. You're like, oh, but that's great, but can I accept that if it means losing this? Watching Multiverse of Madness, it is really hard to believe that this is our Wanda, as the character feels like she just shunted in from some other multiverse. And it doesn't help that we never see her go bad. She just suddenly is. Also, while the focus on her character is straight out of the comic, really caring about her children, missing her children, she was very singularly minded in the comic book story, House of M, which, by the way, left a lot to be desired. Jack Schaefer, we complained a lot about Jack Schaefer, but I got to tell you, we should have known we were well off. Jack Schaefer really wanted to correct a lot of what was in that story and to give Wanda more agency. And I think part of what was so nice about WandaVision was the beautiful work that was done on her romance and bond with Vision. That was wonderful. That was just so touching. So it's really weird to see Wanda and this movie now totally forget Vision and instead just focus on Wanda as a single mother. WandaVision was about a family, Wanda wanting to have a family with Vision specifically, and Multiverse of Madness totally erases that. There's no Vision anywhere in any of the multiverses just made absolutely no sense to me. It was really weird. So that's why I said, did Michael Waldron even watch WandaVision? We're also not seeing anything new. How is this version of Scarlet Witch that much different than Cate Blanchett's Hela? It's like the same routine. And also, she's mixed here, I think, with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman from Batman Returns, underscored by Danny Elfman's score. It feels at times very much like Batman Returns, which I love, by the way. But I think, but not a lot, some people don't. So I think that's interesting. But Batman Returns, I think that they had a better screenwriter, the guy from Heathers, who I think, I'll talk about that in a moment. But also I wanted to say that Elizabeth Olsen looks a lot like Michelle Pfeiffer, and her performance is a little similar in being, devastated and lost and like losing her mind, which is very sad to see Wanda do after her agency in WandaVision. So that also makes it seem a lot like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman performance. But in Batman Returns, we took Selina's journey with her, and that was crucial. Here, we have no idea, again, how Wanda got to this state. We never spend any time with her from her perspective, so we can't even understand what happened after the fact, why it happened. And again, the journey that we did take with her in WandaVision seems like it never happened. So you're just like, is this our Wanda? It doesn't seem like Wanda at all. So, again, I feel like Michael Waldron didn't watch WandaVision or felt like he didn't agree with the changes it made to the comic. But then he didn't incorporate the elements from the comic that people wanted. So it's weird. All right, so bottom line, I think Multiverse of Madness has some great ideas, some great visuals, and some great actors. But ultimately, it gets in its own way. I think both Raimi and Waldron were the wrong creative choices to put on this. And I'm really surprised that Feige, just like with Eternals, couldn't see it. That's really weird. Is this our Kevin Feige? Is this a Feige from a different multiverse who's not as savvy as he's been for over a decade? What's happening? All right, so that's my non-spoiler review of Multiverse of Madness. Spoiler review coming, along with lots of other coverage, because at the very least, like a good Marvel movie should, and this is the saving grace to some degree for this film, it at the very least gives us a lot to discuss. So that's good. Both things that are cool and unfortunately things that don't hit. All right, so share your thoughts down below. Avoid spoilers as best you can because I think it will make a difference in your viewing experience. Subscribe today so you don't miss any of my coverage on this movie. Again, as I said, lots coming toward the end of the week. And then we're going to have Moon Knight finale and then we'll go full WandaVision. So again, subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.